गतामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कलशापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गणन्ति भुरिराजन्. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome, everyone. We have a special guest today, Parajika Parabhuta Pranaji from Dakshineswar, Sri Sarada Mutt, Dakshineswar, a senior nun who has been there since 1976, I believe.
I think so.
She joined in
Yes.
1976, and she's been to our center many times from the very beginning. Some of you will remember that she spoke under the tent and in the early days before we had our building and everything. And so she's agreed to help me out, and we're not sure how we're going to do it exactly.
I put in a few words
But,
when
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
inspired.
When she feels inspired. So we're on the chapter, the last visit to Keshab. Can they hear us from a distance? It's okay? Okay. Only now we don't see Swamiji.
That'll be tough.
That's okay. Okay. So if you remember, the chapter is the last visit to Keshab. It's page 324, but we've actually finished that visit, Thakur's visit to Keshab Chandra Sen, and he left there and he's going to the house of Jaygopal Sen. Jaygopal Sen was one of the very senior Brahmo Samaj devotees. There were different classes of devotees. He is one of those who was very devoted to Sri Ramakrishna, and Thakur also loved him very much. Thakur went to his house several times, and he visited Thakur in Dakshineswar on various occasions also. We have all different classes of devotees for the Brahmo Samaj. Some of them were very much inspired by Sri Ramakrishna, and Keshab, of course, especially, and Vijay Krishna Goswami and others. But the Jaygopal Sen, he also, I don't know how old he was, but probably quite elderly at the time, at least for the standards of India at that time. So we're starting now. On his way to Dakshineswar from Keshab's cottage, Sri Ramakrishna stopped at Jaygopal Sen's house. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening. In the drawing room, Jaygopal's relatives and neighbors had gathered. Vaikuntha, Jaygopal's brother, said to the master, "Sir, we are worldly people. Please give us some advice." Master, do your duty to the world after knowing God. With one hand, hold to the lotus feet of the Lord, and with the other, do your work. Now, I may prompt Didi with a few questions myself.
Oh,
Yeah, because here, this is, Thakur is very often asked this question. And sometimes he says, first realize God, then live in the world, which is way up there. Sometimes he'll
how is
say,
it possible?
yeah, sometimes he'll say here, after knowing God, then live in the world, do your worldly duty. Sometimes he says, after attaining devotion to God. Why does he give three different answers? What's the difference, and which one should we follow?
Swamiji said the opposite. He said, take care of the means and the end will come automatically. And Thakur says, go straight to the goal. And how can it be? Both have opposite approaches, apparently.
So then what do we do? Do your duty to the world after knowing God.
And I think what he means is that you should concentrate on the goal. You should concentrate on trying to realize God and give that more importance than the things that you do in the world. I think it just to keep the aim in mind, not that people can do it. How can you just tell someone to realize God first and then do your duties.
Yeah.
But he's just emphasizing the aim so that people don't lose sight of it.
Okay.
What is the
So get established in the ideal somehow first. Yeah. No, I think because we see if we have no ideal, and we live in the world and doing our duties. First of all, half the things won't be our duties. There'll be things that are just our desires.
Yes, and people keep busy with everything, and then they say, "Oh, they have no time left for meditation." So just to keep the focus on the ideal, I think that's why he says it.
Okay. Do your duty to the world after knowing God. With one hand, hold to the lotus feet of the Lord, and with the other, do your work. And very often he'll add, until the time comes when you can hold on to God with both hands. Yeah. Now, remember, this is to the Brahmos also. His advice is a little bit different depending on the people that he's talking to. Then we get another big question, Vaikuntha. Is the world unreal? Yeah. And the term that's used here is mithya. We have generally 3 or 4 different terms that are used. That this world is mithya, unreal, anitya, transitory, asat, also unreal, and avastu. We have these 4 different terms that are used, all slightly different meanings. Thakur usually doesn't use this term mithya unless it's part of the question, or unless he's quoting what the Jnanis believe. And generally he liked this anitya idea, the transitory. So this is the question: is the world unreal? Because they hear this from the Jnanis.
As Shankaracharya's ideal.
This is Shankaracharya's ideal, really. If we go through the Upanishads,
Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya.
Yeah. So this is his famous statement that Brahman alone is real and the world is unreal, and the jiva is none other than Brahman. This is a famous statement. It's found in one of his treatises. I don't remember which one.
But Sri Ramakrishna won't say that.
Okay, now he's going to give a very interesting answer. He says, Master, yes, it is unreal as long as one has not realized God. Through ignorance, man forgets God and speaks always of I and mine. He sinks down and down, entangled in Maya, deluded by lust and gold. Maya robs him of his knowledge to such an extent that he cannot find the way of escape, though such a way exists.
And Maya is only ego. So the people suffer only because of their egos.
Now, this is always the big question with this Thakur. Is he contradicting Shankaracharya? He seems to turn him upside down a little bit. But if we think about it, then before one realizes God, one takes that attitude that the world is unreal. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he's explaining it from his own point of view. I don't think it contradicts Shankaracharya, because Shankaracharya is saying also at the time of see, Thakur makes that distinction between a siddhanta, final conclusion, and sadhana, and the attitude we take at the time of spiritual practice. He says at the time of spiritual practice that we also have to do this neti and look at this world as unreal. He's not talking about it in that sense here. Now he's saying that, yes, when we look at this world just as some material thing, that the source of our enjoyment and our pleasure and everything, then there's something hollow about it. It has no truth, no basis, nothing to hold on to, nothing substantial. He's using it in that sense. But the big difference is after the realization. So this is why Thakur says, as long as one does not realize God. So when one realizes God, one sees that the world is real. Now, I think the main difference is that, and Thakur explains it nicely, that there'll be 2 classes of realized souls. those who keep the ego of knowledge and those who keep the ego of devotion. Those who keep the ego of devotion will see everything as a manifestation of the divine. Those who keep the ego of knowledge may still have this idea this world is dreamlike afterwards. The Shankaracharya. We have our Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma in the Upanishads, so we have to put them side by side. The world is unreal, but this world is nothing but Brahman itself.
Yeah.
So, but as long as we see the world, and that world meaning name and form is unreal for Shankaracharya afterwards. For Sri Ramakrishna, he still sees the Divine Mother shining beneath everything. Everything is a manifestation. And there's a long section explaining, this will explain what Thakur really means. He said, yes, it is unreal as long as one has not realized God. See, normally we think, if we're Gyanis, that once we realize God, then we know that the world is unreal. Before the realization of God, we take the world to be real. It seems opposite, right? Now we all think, yeah, the world is 100% real. Yeah, but he says before the realization of God, it is unreal. So I think what he means is that it's just something hollow. It's something empty. It's something that won't fulfill us. Shukadi? Okay. Then, through ignorance, man forgets God and speaks always of I and mine. So this is Admaya. This is I and mine. And he sinks down and down, entangled in Maya, deluded by lust and gold. Maya robs him of his knowledge to such an extent that he cannot find the way of escape, though such a way exists. Now, this is one of Thakur's techniques. This will be introducing a song. So he's taking a line from the song, and then he'll sing the song. It's a very nice way of teaching technique. Then he says, listen to a song. When such delusion veils the world through Mahamaya's spell, that Brahma is bereft of sense and Vishnu loses consciousness, what hope is left for men? Now he's going to talk a little bit, then he'll finish the song, and then we'll get that line. You all know from your experience how impermanent the world is. So this was Thakur's main criteria for real or unreal. That when he says the world is unreal, impermanent, he doesn't mean it's a imaginary or delusion or some mental projection or something. He's not that type of idealistic approach. So you all know from your experience how impermanent the world is. Look at it this way. How many people have come into the world and again passed away? People are born and they die. This moment the world is, and the next it is not. It is impermanent. Those you think to be your very own will not exist for you when you close your eyes in death. Again, you see people who have no immediate relatives, and yet, for the sake of a grandson, they will not go to Benares to lead a holy life. Oh, what will come of my Haru then, they argue. Then he'll continue with the song. The narrow channel first is made, and there the trap is set. But open though the passage lies, the fish, once safely through the gate, does not come out again. This is a type of fish trap that they have. Yet, even though a way leads forth, encased within its own cocoon, the worm remains to die. So this is what he says, that though a way exists to get out of this, that we don't find a way to escape because of Maya. This kind of world is illusory and impermanent. So this is his distinction. If we can see this world now as a manifestation of the divine, then we can say it's real. If we see it just as some material object, something for our pleasure and enjoyment and everything, then it's completely transitory, and it doesn't have that level of reality to it. So this kind of world is illusory and impermanent.
But all things are made of this vibration,
Okay.
attraction and repulsion. So how could possibly exist without something that makes it vibrate? and so that's a proof that that the world is divine. It's not a material, simply material. But anyway, we get stuck in attachment.
Yeah, and a lot of it is also just this attitude of this the creation of the Divine Mother that comes from this. She gives birth to this universe like her own child and everything. So a lot of it is what Thakur was saying, and this is very, very much a distinctive aspect of his teaching, is that it depends on our mental attitude. He puts that way ahead of any objective type of truth, because he doesn't really believe that the truth is found in any type of doctrine or anything like that. Swamiji also makes that statement, that it's just in realization. The truth of something is the thing itself. So what the real nature of the world, what the real nature of Brahman is, and Brahman is what Brahman is. Our experience will always be partial until it's the ultimate experience, and then it's indescribable. So this is that catch-22. But this is why we know that famous statement that Swami Turiyananji made at the end of his life, Brahma Satyam Jagat Satyam.
Yeah.
That he was a great jnani and a great follower of Shankaracharya, but this was really Thakur's idea that we can see this world not only as real, but as something that that we can take joy in, and he's going to talk about that in a little bit. So now it's something to trap us through our attachments and our desires and everything. But if we know how to live in the world,
then it's a matter of joy.
Yes. So this is the other way that he's using this real and unreal. It's really brilliant the way he explains all of it. One simple question: is the world then unreal? Now it's interesting. Is the world unreal? I mean, it's just not that the Brahmos believed that. They also didn't believe that. They weren't jnanis that way, Shankaracharya type of jnanis. In fact, Thakur, for some reason, always called them bhaktas. He said, "You're not dry jnanis, you're bhaktas." Because they would sing and they had their devotion, but it was an impersonal type of devotion. They were something in between.
Impersonal, but with all qualities that they would praise. That they would praise all those qualities.
Yes, yeah. So a little bit like Western religions, especially God the Father.
Must have been influenced by Christianity.
Yeah, definitely. So. Yeah, of course. Yeah. A neighbor. Why, sir, should one hold to God with one hand and to the world with the other? Okay, so he's intelligent. Yeah. And this is what the Keshab used to say to Thakur. Yes, you're telling us to do this, but one day you'll sting us. That means that yeah, you're telling us, but what you're really saying is that you're going to have to give up the world and hold on to God with both hands. And he said, no, I'm not doing anything like that, but it'll happen eventually. So he says, why, sir, should one hold to God with one hand and to the world with the other? Why should one even stretch out one's hand to hold to the world if it is impermanent? Now, if this is a young man asking the question, or a young woman asking the question with great sincerity, then Thakur would say, yes, you're right, then renounce everything. But this is probably someone a little bit out of curiosity and a little bit of a more intellectual type of question. Master, the world is not impermanent if one lives there after knowing God. So this is that same thing, that after we realize God, of course it's impermanent in one sense, but again, he uses these terms in two different senses, especially vastu. The term vastu. Philosophically, it can mean something has some substance to it in a philosophical sense. But the other way, it means that something has substance to it, and in terms of something to really hold on to, that can give meaning to our lives. So this is the sense that if one lives after knowing God, then this world can be meaningful. This world, we can get great joy. We can see the divine in everything. Then he says, listen to another song, the Ramprasad song. O mind, you do not know how to farm. Fallow lies the field of your life. If you had only worked it well, how rich a harvest you might reap. Hedge it about with Kali's name, if you would keep your harvest safe. This is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. Did you listen to the song? Hedge it about with Kali's name, if you would keep your harvest safe. Then he says, surrender yourself to God and you will achieve everything. And again, he repeats that line. This is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. What is this hedge? What do we have to, because we have to protect ourselves a little bit. Huh? How do we do that? Living in the world. Because we all live in the world, you know that. Don't think, we talk about renouncing the world. Renouncing the world, wherever we go to renounce the world. We also live in the world, but it's a little different. We have a different type of hedge. Thakur says that one is out in the middle of the field and the other has a fort that they can hide in and everything. So Didi, what do you say? What is this hedge? He says Kali's name, but it has to be more than that, huh? This devotional attitude.
I never remember reading that.
Oh,
Is it?
yeah. So it's a Ramprasad song. He says, hedge it about with Kali's name, if you would keep your harvest safe. This is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. I think it means basically having a spiritual attitude.
Yeah.
It means practicing surrender, practicing sharanagati, the reliance on God, and having that as the ultimate goal in life.
But in Tantra also, it's a real, the name of God is a real power. It does protect. I mean, it does prevent all kinds of dangers.
Yes.
It's a real power.
Durga, Durga, Durga bole, Jeva pote chole jai, Shulo hosto, Shulo pani, Rakha korentai. The very nice song that those who, and we have many devotees that will not leave the house, will not go out or anything without saying Durga, Durga. So those who take the name of Durga, Shiva himself with his trident will stand there protecting them. We had one devotee, I don't know if you know Sunanda, what's her name? Sunanda and Jay. Huh? What was Jay's other name? Did you have another name? No, okay. Anyhow, they got mugged one day. They went out and somebody, I don't think hurt them or anything, but actually, accosted them and took their money and everything. So she said to me, how is it possible that it happened? I took the name of Durga before I left the house. So I said, perhaps otherwise you would have been killed or something. Anyhow, this is a question of faith.
Oh, there's a story about a disciple of the Holy Mother. I don't know where I read this, but he used to go for his bath in the Ganga every day, and on that ghat there was a tantric sadhak, and he attracted that young man and engaged him in conversation every day, and finally the young man was very bright. He was a tantric, wanted to attract him to serve him. So he said, I shall initiate you. The young man said, I'm already initiated, so I don't want to take initiation from you. But the tantric said, oh, well, who has initiated you? He didn't want to say Holy Mother. He said, oh, a woman. Oh, a woman. Never mind. Never mind. Then you take initiation from me. Again, he refused. He said, if you don't take initiation from me, then within 3 days you will die.
Oh.
And the young man, then he went back to his place, and he was really worried. He said, this fellow is powerful, and he can really hurt me. So first day nothing happened. Second day also nothing happened. He thought, oh, it's nonsense. The third night he was under his mosquito net in his bed, and he felt some uneasy feeling, as though someone is entering his room, but he didn't see anybody. Then he began to think this is the third day, and that tantric was very powerful. So he must be sending something. Maybe he's really trying to kill me. He started doing japa as fervently as he could, concentrating on Holy Mother and doing japa. And as he did japa, that force that he felt was coming towards him started receding. And if he stopped, the force again would come towards him. So that he spent the whole night like that, in terror and fervently doing japa. And finally in the morning, that force seemed to recede, and he didn't feel it again. So he then went running to Holy Mother.
No.
Holy Mother was still living there,
No.
and he went running to Bakbazar to meet her, and she was standing in the doorway as though waiting for him.
Oh.
And as soon as she saw him, he came close. She said, "Never do that again. You got away with it
He
this time.
should have gone to her before.
You got
Yeah.
away with it this time."
Yeah, she told Swamiji when Swamiji was in Kashmir.
So she
and
protected him
yeah.
all that time.
when Swamiji was in Kashmir and he got cursed by the person, and she said, "Yes, Baba, we have to honor these things also. There are people with powers that can do things." Things, yeah.
So japa is that hedge.
Yes. Okay, did I read this? Okay. Yes, it is a strong hedge indeed. If you but realize God, you won't see the world as unsubstantial. Okay, so now we're getting this vastu, and vastu is see the world as something of value. See, at the time of spiritual practice, we're trying to break that attachment to the world and that longing to enjoy the world and everything. So we're told to try to see it as empty and hollow. This is, the two songs that Didi referred to. That first, this world is the framework of delusion, of illusion, the Ramprasad song, and then the other one is a mansion of mirth. This is exactly what Thakur means. One is on the way up. At the time of doing our spiritual practice, we try to look upon this world as to emphasize. This is one spiritual path that we emphasize how much suffering there is in the world. Just so we break that attachment and realize there's something permanent to cling to. And then afterwards, this world can be a mansion of mirth. I don't know when that happens, but. So if you but realize God, you won't see the world as unsubstantial. He who has realized God knows that God himself has become the world and all living beings. Now, this is something that Shankaracharya, he won't put it this way because he's always worried about preserving the purity of Brahman, that Brahman can't change and can't become anything. So sometimes, I mentioned last time probably, we explained this in terms of the Shakti is really the power of Brahman that is manifesting as the universe. Brahman remains Brahman. That is unchanged. But these are distinctions we use just so we can, as if the Brahman needs us to protect him, to preserve the purity of Brahman. So they're going to know Brahman can't change, Brahman can't do any of these things. But Thakur very often used that language in Brahman itself that becomes the universe, or the Divine Mother herself. If he says the Divine Mother herself has become all this, then we know it's that Shakti aspect is there. But he didn't care, because ultimately they're one and the same, Divine Mother and Brahman. That was one of his great teachings. That Shakti and Brahman are non-different. So he could speak of it in terms of Brahman or Shakti. It didn't make any difference. So he who has realized God knows that God himself has become the world and all living beings. When you feed your child, now it's going to give us some practical advice. When you feed your child, you should feel that you are feeding God.
This is exactly the advice that Swami Saradananda gave to Mrs. Olibul. Once Mrs. Olibul had a grandchild who was very sick.
Tell them who she is, Mrs. Olibul.
Mrs. Olibul
She
was
wrote a book
disciple,
about her.
an American lady who was disciple of Swami Vivekananda, and she was a tremendous support to Swamiji and all of his projects in India as well as in the West. And so this Mrs. Olibul also was very close to Swami Saradananda.
Yes.
When Swami Saradananda was in America. And he knew very well Mrs. Olibul's condition, what her situation was. The granddaughter was very sick, and the daughter was also unable to take care of the child. So Mrs. Olibul had to look after this grandchild and a sick child also, and a sick daughter. And she complained to Swami Saradananda in a letter that, you see, this is my situation, and I don't have any time to meditate. I can't attend your classes also, which I would love to attend, but I'm not able to come out at all. And Swami Saradananda wrote to her very stiffly, well, you must think of your grandchild as your chosen ideal. When you feed that child, think that you are feeding your chosen ideal. And if you think that this is any different, this discipline is any different than your meditation, then you do not understand Sri Ramakrishna at all. She became a very highly evolved soul.
Swamiji had so much, such a high opinion, and so much faith in her. She was the one that he would really, very, very rarely would he ask other people's opinion about things, but he didn't always follow it. But he used to call her Dhiramata. Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he
steady
described
mother.
her as a saint.
Yeah.
He said if ever there was a saint, it was Mrs. Olibul.
Yeah. So she was very helpful in the formation of Bellarmine and other things, and a wonderful person. Saint Sarah.
And the support to all of Swamiji's disciples and all of Thakur's devotees.
Yeah. There were so many of these women of this country that, and England, of course, with Sister Nivedita, who played a very special role in the movement. Josephine MacLeod and Sarah Bull, several of them, Sister Christine, and really did tremendous work, was so helpful. They picked up Swamiji's ideal far more than any of the men in this country. Who were the men that followed Swamiji and did any work in this country? Are there any? There's not one that can compare.
Not compared to them.
No, to
Francis
any of them.
Liggett did a lot.
He did something, but he was more friend of
Professor
Swamiji.
Wright and all. They all had a part.
They had a role to play. Yeah.
But these women seem to have been born for that.
Yeah.
They're born to be the instruments.
Yeah.
Of
They
Swamiji.
caught that spirit somehow. There's a beautiful statement by Josephine MacLeod that when I first heard Swamiji say something, I said to myself, yes, that's true. And every other thing that I heard him say, I said to him, yes, that's true. And she had that as good samskaras, I guess, that she could appreciate Swamiji.
Then
The Mead sisters also,
yeah.
for the work in California. Yeah, there were so many that played an important role.
Mm.
Yeah. So when you feed your child, you should feel that you are feeding God. This means this samsara. This means turn it into a worldly, then into a divine family. Connect everything with the divine. Then it changes the way we live in the world. There's no longer a source of bondage, it's a source of joy and the realization.
Many people who are devotees, they name their children after Sri Ramakrishna and Swamiji and Holy Mother.
Yeah.
They give names Sharda or Narayan.
Yeah, sure.
For that purpose,
Yeah.
so that they can think of them that way.
Yeah. You should look on your father and mother as veritable manifestations of God, and the manifestation of God and the Divine Mother, and serve them as such. If a man enters the world after realizing God, he does not generally keep up physical relations with his wife. Both of them are devotees. They love to talk only of God and pass their time in spiritual conversation. They serve other devotees of God, for they know that God alone has become all living beings. And knowing this, they devote their lives to the service of others. Neighbor. But, sir, such a husband and wife are not to be found anywhere. Yeah, this is one thing that we always, I especially, I wonder about these things, that Thakur, some of his teachings are so high that we wonder how many people can really follow these things to that extent. But he came to give a very high ideal. This, unless we have that very high ideal, then we won't be able to aspire to something. We have to keep going higher and higher and higher. We had one of the lay brothers who lived in our Trabuco Center, Gurdas. He used to have a sign on his door. He had a little studio there that said, "If you want to jump over the, if you want to jump over the fence, try to jump over the moon." Right? So that means that have a high ideal. If we don't realize that ideal, we'll still be way better than other people. So Swamiji had two interesting statements. One, never give people an ideal too high for them. And two, never lower the ideal. Now, they seem to be a little contradictory, but not really. It means that if there's some people like Thakur, what good will it do if he tells them, hold on to God with both hands? He has to give them an ideal suitable to them. But it's not lowering the ideal because it's a step on the way. So Swamiji didn't want to compromise with truth. But at the same time, it doesn't do any good to tell the people that, I keep referring to Swami Bhuteshanandaji because I'm reading that book. And he has this long section where he says, it doesn't do any good to tell people to give up all desires. He said, they'll walk out of the room. They won't listen to you. He said, let them fulfill their desires with some discrimination and observe how much joy is really in it, how much they're gaining from it, how much bondage comes from it. Gradually, they'll see that there's some joy in transcending all of these desires. So this question, such a husband and wife are not to be found anywhere, it's true that it's a rare thing because it's a very high ideal.
But if people are intelligent, they can learn vicariously by seeing, observing other people.
We have to have at least one or two who can follow this ideal. Yeah. So Thakur says, yes, they can be found, though they may be very rare. So if they can be found, even if it's rare, that means that it's possible. Do we have your cough drop?
Yeah, it's in my mouth.
Oh, it's in your mouth. Okay.
I have
Yeah.
allergies.
Swamiji used to make a very interesting statement. He said, you judge an apple tree by the best apple on it. It may have lots of apples that are a little rotten or fall and everything, but the real quality of the tree is by the best apple. That tells us, is it the ideal? That's the best one. So this is how we judge something, not by all the people who fail. But if one or two can realize that high ideal, then we know that this is a real ideal. And the others are just, they haven't ripened the same way that the best apples have ripened. But we don't criticize the ideal because very few people can realize it. We understand that's the nature of an ideal. So they can be found, though they are very rare. Worldly people cannot recognize them. So this is the other thing, that these people who realize this very high ideal, very often they remain hidden. They don't care to be seen by others, and others people are not capable of appreciating them or understanding them. They'll think that they're dull, boring people or whatever. In order to lead such a life, both husband and wife must be spiritual. It is possible to lead such a life if both of them have tasted the bliss of God. Now, this is that other case. Is this only after God realization, or
No,
only after?
even a little bliss they can experience if they meditate, if they do japa regularly, they will get some joy from that.
Yes. God's special grace is necessary to create such a couple. Otherwise, there will always be misunderstanding between them. In that case, the one has to leave the other. I know why Thakur was saying this to the Brahmos. I'm not sure of it. Life becomes very miserable if a husband and wife do not agree.
Well, because the Brahmas didn't care for renunciation, so
They really didn't accept the ideal of Sunday and no sannyasa and their tradition and everything. Yeah, and they criticized a little bit this emphasis on renunciation. Everybody criticized Thakur for that. Even the devotees who came, their parents always hated that their children are going to renounce the world and everything. Yeah, even today we know that very few parents want to hear their kids talk about renunciation. I always find it very interesting that they can be great devotees, but God forbid a child, a son or daughter, should renounce the world and become sadhu. But there are exceptions, of course. There are exceptions, but very hard for people to appreciate the ideal of renunciation. And this was Thakur's main teaching. This is why we don't have huge numbers, why these other groups will come and you'll see millions of people flocking to them. And we're never going to be popular that way because of this emphasis on renunciation. Holy Mother was once told that everybody says that Thakur's main teaching, that as many paths, as many faiths, so many paths. And she said, yes, people say that. But to me, it seemed like his main teaching was renunciation, vairagya. To renounce everything for God. This is the one thing worth having. So give up everything. Not that everybody leaves the householder life, but householders also have to practice mental renunciation. Now you remember another nice incident in the life of Swami Ramakrishna. And then when he went to Chennai, Madras in those days, and he used to speak in small gatherings. Sometimes very few people would come. And somebody once said, Swamiji, all you talk about is renunciation. How do you expect people to come? We're householders and everything. And he said, what can I do? This is all that I learned from Sri Ramakrishna. This was the main thing that we learned from him. So how can I dilute that message? And people get whatever they can from these teachings. We read these things over and over again. Some things sink in, and some things we put into practice. Some things we just stand in awe of and think, well, no, this is such a beautiful ideal. We appreciate it, but everybody can put these things into practice in their own limited way. So life becomes very miserable if husband and wife do not agree. The wife will say to her husband day and night, "Why did my father marry me to such a person? I can't get enough to eat or to feed my children. I haven't clothes enough to cover my body or to give to my children. I haven't received a single piece of jewelry from you. How happy you have made me. Ah, you keep your eyes closed and mutter the name of God? Now do give up all these crazy ideas." Actually, it's usually the other way around. It's usually the women who are the spiritual ones, and the husband who says, why can't we go on vacation and have a good time? You want to sit here all the time. Devotee, there are such obstacles, certainly. Besides, the children may be disobedient. There's no end of difficulties. Now, sir, what is the way? So this is that question. Upaiki. This is a question that comes up all of the time. And Thakur, he answers it with a consistent list, but sometimes changing the order. He has his very standard things. We know that. Generally, he gives so much emphasis to holy company that most of the time, that'll be the first thing that he says. Keep holy company because it's the easiest and most natural, and we need that living example. Other times he'll say prayer or japa, name of God. He'll give different answers, but most of the time he'll say the holy company. Master, it is extremely difficult to practice spiritual discipline and at the same time lead a householder's life. There are many handicaps: disease, grief, poverty, misunderstanding with one's wife. Now remember, he's just talking to the men here. And disobedient, stupid, and stubborn children. I don't have to give you a list of them. But still, there is a way out. One should pray to God, going now and then into solitude and make efforts to realize Him. Now, in the list that we find, when we see holy company is first, generally he says, if you can't get holy company, then practice solitude. And this is the one that's emphasized probably most often after holy company. Here, for some reason, he's mentioning it first, to go into solitude. He meant this very literally. This wasn't something that, and not that many people can do it, but he really wanted people, he would tell them, even get a separate little place, have a little house or a room or a hut someplace where you can go, and you won't be bothered by the family or worldly worries or anything, and dive deep. Solitude means to dive deep into spiritual practice, not just to be away from the family, but to really be very serious about spiritual practice. Some people, of course, can do it at home. People who live alone, and they're practicing solitude all of the time. But it can't be wasted, that solitude. And not really solitude, just living alone. But we have to do that. So he says, pray to God, going now and then into solitude, and make efforts to realize Him. As much as Thakur talks about grace, he always talks about we have to strive, we have to work very hard, we have to put forth effort. This is another question that so many people have, this dilemma: how much is our own effort and how much is God's grace? Now, this neighbor will ask the question that's always in the back of everybody's mind. Does this mean we have to renounce the world? So, neighbor, must one leave home then? Master, no, not altogether. Whenever you have leisure, go into solitude for a day or two. Yeah, sometimes he'll say 6 months, 6 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 days, whatever you can manage. But he didn't mind if people did it for, really a long stretch, if they're capable of it. Not everybody is capable of even spending a day in solitude. It depends on the mind. At that time, don't have relations with the outside world, and don't hold conversation with worldly people on worldly affairs. You must live either in solitude or in the company of holy men. So these are the two things. Neighbor, how can one recognize a holy man? Master, He who has surrendered his body, mind, and innermost self to God is surely a holy man. He who has renounced lust and gold is surely a holy man. He is a holy man who does not regard woman with the eyes of a worldly person. He never forgets to look upon a woman as his mother and to offer her his worship if he happens to be near her. Now, we always have to remember that Thakur is talking to men here. All of these things apply equally. And Holy Mother, when she spoke to the women devotees, she would tell them equally to women as to men. That it sounds like Thakur doesn't care about the women, but they're not present. This was something that just the custom of the day. That when they had these public gatherings, that it would just be the men there. The women would be in their own quarters, and Thakur would always go and meet with them. Generally, he would take his meal with them. They would serve food, and he would give them teaching. The very sad thing is that we don't have a record because that's the one time that M wouldn't be present. Thakur would go by himself. So we don't have a record of all the things he said to the women, the advice that he told them. We assume that it was the same, that he would tell the women to be careful about keeping the company of men and the same things. That, but we don't read about it. So we sometimes get the impression, oh, didn't he care about women? We have to understand the customs of the day and everything. So the holy man constantly thinks of God and does not indulge in any talk except about spiritual things. Furthermore, he serves all beings, knowing that God resides in everybody's heart. These in general are the signs of a holy man. In Gita, we find that phrase that engage in the welfare of all beings. He used this sarva bhuta hite rata. This generally refers to the jnani for some reason, but for any holy person, that they'll have this sympathy for others and this one feeling of oneness with others. And this, of course, we see in Swamiji's life more than anything. That feeling of oneness with everyone and sympathy and love for everyone. If we want to find the sign of a holy man, we look at Swamiji and that tremendous heart that Swamiji had. Neighbor, must one always live in solitude? Master, haven't you seen the trees on the footpath along a street? They are fenced around as long as they are very young. Otherwise, cattle destroy them. We were reading the other day, this Swami again, Bhuteshnanaji Maharaj, that he was saying, what a power of observation Sri Ramakrishna had. That every little thing he saw, it would turn into some spiritual example and illustration. And a lot of it was with the farmers in the field and bringing water to the field and everything. But this is another example. We go and we see that cows coming and eating some plant that's not protected. What do we don't draw any spiritual conclusion. But he comes up with this beautiful illustration. Haven't you seen the trees on the footpath along the street? They are fenced around as long as they are very young. Otherwise, cattle destroy them. But there's no longer any need of fences when their trunks grow thick and strong. Then they won't break even if an elephant is tied to them. So that means that we really develop some type of spiritual strength. The problem is when we think too highly of our spiritual attainments and think that we're beyond these things. We don't have to worry about temptations and getting mixed up with the world and everything. Then we have this pride that comes. Then we let ourselves in for some fall or something. So this was when we reach the point that the elephant can be tied. That means really God realization or absolute dependence on God, some very high spiritual state. For us, we're still in the state of being hedged around. We have to protect ourselves from the different environments and influence of worldly people and other things. Just so, there will be no need for you to worry and fear if you make your mind as strong as a thick tree trunk. First of all, see, sometimes we'll say first realize God. Now we say make the mind strong. Then sometimes develop devotion for God. It just means we have to reach some state of spiritual attainment and advancement at least. First of all, try to acquire discrimination. Discrimination, we have to know what to do and what not to do, what's helpful, what's not helpful. Thakur didn't care too much for this philosophical discrimination. It was always this practical discrimination. What's helpful in spiritual life, what will get us attached, what will free us, that type of discrimination. Break the jackfruit open only after you have rubbed your hands with oil. Then the sticky milk won't smear them. So Thakur says the oil of devotion. Neighbor. Okay, now another good question. What is discrimination? Vivek. Master. Discrimination is the reasoning by which one knows that God alone is real and all else is unreal. Okay, now classic definition. This is a classic definition. But again, what does he mean by unreal? Real means eternal and unreal means impermanent. The passing show. That nothing will last, that nothing will have permanent value for us, the things we enjoy, that they'll be gone. So this idea of impermanent. He who has acquired discrimination knows that God is the only substance, capital S, and all else is non-existent. With the awakening of the spirit of discrimination, a man wants to know God. So this discrimination, we can't have that longing for the real until we learn that that there is something, that there is a difference between that which is impermanent. Unless we know that something is impermanent, that something will lead to suffering in this world, unless we have a clear understanding of that, we won't long to get out of it. So the discrimination, then we have to realize that there is something that can help us transcend all of this. There's something real, permanent to hold on to. And it's our own self and God dwelling within. With the awakening of the spirit of discrimination, a man wants to know God. On the contrary, if a man loves the unreal, such things as creature comforts, name, fame, and wealth, so impermanent things, then he doesn't want to know God, who is of the very nature of reality. Through discrimination between the real and the unreal, one seeks to know God. Listen to a song. Come, let us go for a walk, O mind, to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree, and there beneath it gather the four fruits of life. Of your two wives, dispassion and worldliness, bring only dispassion. Bring along dispassion only on your way to the tree, and ask her son discrimination about the truth. By turning the mind within oneself, one acquires discrimination, and through discrimination, one thinks of truth. Yeah, we have to be introspective. We have to think a little deeply about things. Then the mind feels the desire to go for a walk to Kali, the wish-fulfilling tree. Reaching that tree, that is to say, going near to God, you can, without any effort, gather four fruits, namely dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Yes, after realizing God, one can also get, if one so desires, dharma, artha, and kama, which are necessary for leading the worldly life. Okay, then we can stop. Any final words that you want to say? No?
I'm struggling with
Okay.
allergy.
Anyhow, we're very happy that Parvati Pranaji would join us. She just came in from India, so she has a little jet lag and a little bit of allergy and a little throat problem. But she will be speaking a week from Sunday, 15th.
Yeah, 15.
Yeah. So everyone is welcome. It'll be live streaming, but please come. You can meet her in person if you come to the center. that on the 15th. Good. So we will close. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukam Bhatadu Vikraham Vai Ishavataram Paranishamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namah. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you. Okay.